Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, brains behind the business. It's your front row seat to the business elite. New episodes twice a week.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad, brains behind the business. And of course, the yang to my yin is here, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I love hearing that new intro. It's getting me so fired up and excited about this new format we got going on here at the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm great. I'm high flying, but you know where I want to go off the draw today? I want to pass the puck right back to you and ask you how you're feeling about your TED Talk finally hitting them airwaves. Hey, a year and a week after it was delivered. They had to make us wait for it, didn't they? How you feeling, buddy?
Yeah, it's been wild. Like I was talking actually earlier this week, and I started working on trying to get a TED Talk would have been March of 2022.
I remember.
So it's been about 2 years and 4 months that have
in the making.
It's been in the works, and I checked it yesterday, and we just passed 2,000 views. So it's rolling.
It's rolling.
Get on it. I'll put the link in the podcast notes, but check it out. It's a ton of fun, and also, of course, it has a very strong message out there for folks, and lots of great feedback.
One that I would argue no leader listening can afford to miss or afford sharing with their people. Just wanted to add that in before we get this party started, but let's go. We got such an exciting guest today, so let's get behind those brains, shall we?
Absolutely. And so, of course, we got to start off with a quote. And I have one here from Anthony DeMello, and he says, "We do not have a fear of the unknown. What we fear is giving up the known."
Oh, so good and so true. Why'd you choose this one today, though? Tell our folks.
It's something that I was actually talking to my therapist about earlier this week, was this element of, it's not about doing new things. It's not about all of those future plans that I'm working on. It's just being comfortable with giving up what you know and stepping into that trust. And so I wanted to start there today because I think it's a very strong message. Also, it's exactly what we talk about in terms of our own mindset, as well as when we're stepping into entrepreneurship, which we'll talk to Aziz about. It is stepping into the unknown because we don't know what's going to happen today. We don't know what's going to happen to our business, and we have to learn to trust ourselves in order to step into that. So with that, of course, I already sent a little bit of an intro over, but we have a special guest here today, Aziz Albahar, the CEO and founder of Mojo, TEDx speaker himself, with his talk, Courage to Fail. And almost more importantly, we went to college together. Aziz, how are you? Thanks for joining us on the show.
I'm great. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Aziz, can we please warm our crowd up by sharing a story about your days at MIT with Robert here? You gotta have something good for our folks.
This is a while ago now, but we both majored in mechanical engineering, and we had a senior project that required us to work on building, let's say, some sort of machine or process. It was a big team. I think we had 16 people on that team, and with 16 people, as you can imagine, there are different personalities, and trying to steer the ship and get yourself to the finish line and the final presentation is not easy. So Rob, I can always say, came in every day with a smile on his face. He was a bit goofy, which was great because there were a lot of serious people on that team and in our major in general. So I think he lit up the room. He helped us get through things, and on days where things weren't working or we couldn't figure things out, Rob was always there to crack a joke or keep us entertained and happy. So I'm grateful for that, and if that's my first memory, then that's a good thing.
He was a board 2.0 leader right from the get. Hey, Aziz. I love it.
Absolutely.
Aziz,
It's so
what are-
funny. It's so
Yeah.
funny. The feedback that I get from chatting with folks is always like, yeah, you were just relaxed, and like everyone was super stressed out.
I feel like that's a superpower at a school like MIT. We got to go there in terms of the mindset strategies behind that childlike state. But where I want to start off, Aziz, plug our folks into who you are, the mission you're on, and what inspired you to go on this entrepreneurial mission in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Aziz. I was born and raised here in Kuwait. Whereas I was mentioning earlier, it's about 125, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 Celsius for those listening in from other parts of the world. I was born and raised here. I did my undergrad at MIT, which is where I met Rob. And after that, spent a few years in the oil and gas sector, both here in the region, in the Middle East, but also spent some time all over North America, as far north as Alaska and as far south as, fairly southern parts of Texas. And then decided to go get my MBA at Harvard Business School. So spent a couple of years there, where sort of shifted gears and careers a bit to more of the technology space. So spent some time in clean energy rather than oil, and then pivoted to working at Apple for a few years on the iPhone production team. So I had about a couple hundred days in China during the 3 years that I was there in Cupertino. And that was quite eye-opening, obviously, and again, rewarding to still be able to say that, I worked on some of the products that people use today, and, pretty actively as well. So that's sort of my work career. But then I decided, as you guys mentioned earlier, to do another pivot and go to something much, much, much smaller, where I was, going from a company that had 120,000 employees to where we only had a few people, which is where I am today. So I moved back to Kuwait, started a venture builder with a few folks here, where we incepted and incubated startups from scratch. And in the last couple of years, I've been on my own journey now as the founder and CEO of a company called Mojo.
Aziz, I would love to hear the difference that you've noticed between, some of these big oil and gas companies compared to a company like Apple, and then even compared to some of the startups you found.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, if we're talking about the big organizations, I would say there's a lot of similarities because they're big. So when you're big, you have to have processes, you have to have a lot of structure, a lot of meetings, obviously, and then even reviews and of course many layers. So I would say dealing with a corporate environment, obviously the characters are different, the people are different, but the structure is the same. You have to be there, you have to perform on a team, but there's sort of a floor and a ceiling to your performance and what you can do on any given day. And no matter how much you do at X amount of time, there's only so much you can influence, right? Whereas at a startup, there's really no upper limit. And that's the beauty of it. The extra minute you spend sending an email or responding to a call or doing outreach or even, doing a podcast like this could take the company to its next level and could be the lucky break that you need to get you to where you need to be. So I would say that's one of the key differences is the amount of impact that you can have at a company that's small is almost unlimited. And every person you hire, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, in a bit, becomes more and more important, for the wheel to keep turning.
And Aziz, I'm curious to understand what that transition was like coming out of all that structure and processes of the big corporate environment that you described, and then going into a smaller startup type of culture and condition. What transition did you have to go through as a leader to be able to step into that?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, you don't realize once you're in a lot of structure that once that all of that gets taken away from you, the foundation, you sort of have to rebuild it very quickly. And so you have to put in, something as simple as HR policies, which is something you never have to think about when you're at a company. Do we have paternity leave? And that's a decision that we had to make ourselves and go ahead and institute it, even though no one else was really doing it at the time. And even, things as simple as, what email client are we going to use? There are sort of mundane things, but you have to make all those decisions when you're starting something from scratch. And then as the company grows, obviously the culture grows, and as you alluded to, your leadership style becomes more and more important. So with 2 or 3 people, it's okay. It's almost like us doing this podcast today. Things flow fairly easily. Feedback is easy, but once you start to grow a bit more than that, it's how you show up every day that really matters. And I think you asked about leadership style, and I think one of the things that I like to think that I do is I'm fairly vulnerable as a leader, and I'm quite open. So I think one of the issues with a lot of leaders today, especially at bigger corporations sometimes, is that they think they have all the answers, or at least they seem to their direct report that they have all the answers. And so that creates sort of a barrier, sort of like almost like a force field around them, where of course whatever they said or whatever they did must be right. Whereas I think at a smaller company, all those layers get stripped away, and everyone can see everything that's going on. It's quite clear. There's nothing to really hide. And so I think it really helps for you to be more vulnerable and more open to feedback and opinions. And whether it's something as simple as, hey, to my team, I need your feedback on this product or this feature we're going to launch. What do you think? I'm going to put it in your hands. You use it. Tell me what you think. I really care about your opinion. And then that goes directly to our users. Or whether it's something like, how do you guys think we should adjust the working hours? Things like that. So some things, of course, you have to make decisions on your own and just trust yourself. But there's a lot that you can do to solicit opinions of others, and I think it makes the team really feel like they're included as part of the process, and makes the company stronger.
You did mention, Aziz, about hiring, and so of course we got to go there. How do you think about hiring, and what's your approach in that space?
So the first thing I'll say, and I think if you listen to anyone who's talked about, startups or hiring, the first thing you'll hear is no matter how well you do, your chances of having the perfect hire or a great hire for any position are about 50-50. And it's really, really tough to get hiring right. And so what does that mean? That means if the average is 50-50, that probably most people are getting it more wrong than right. And so for me, I know for sure that I can tell you I made a bunch of mistakes in the initial phase of building out our venture builder, and even now with Mojo. But I think with hiring, culture becomes more and more and more important the smaller the team is. And so with a very big team, let's say if you have 100 people, one person coming in, it's not great. It's not gonna help things out. But if they're not a great culture fit, eventually sort of the group takes over and maybe molds them to be that fit. But when you're a very small team, each person can be so influential. So with hiring, what we really care about, obviously the non-negotiables are you have to be able to do the work. You have to be super open to being challenged in different ways. And so I don't think a single person, obviously myself included, that's been with the company has done exactly their job description. We try to be pretty broad with the JD. So, you might cook and clean, who knows, but who knows what you could do here. But I think the important thing is that people are flexible and, of course, within reason, open to doing different things and open to learning. And I think if you are open to learning and you're curious, that's such a valuable skill. And also if you are, I think adaptable. At a small company, you have to know that, the hits are going to keep coming. The strategy might be this one day, it might change to something completely different the next day. So as long as you're not perturbed by these bumps in the road, the car will keep moving and it'll keep going straight. And it's almost like a built-in shock absorber that you have for your persona. And so we really look for that sort of above and beyond the core ability to do the technical skill that you were hired for. And by the way, even if I come in and I hire someone for a certain role, it's very possible they evolve by themselves to do a different role. This has happened with a few of our teammates as well.
I hear you talking about mistakes. The batting average on hiring top talent is 50-50, even on your best days. You obviously look for the curious learning growth mindset when you're hiring that talent. And you gave a TED talk, I noticed, on the topic of having the courage to fail. So can you give us a little bit of that backstory in terms of what inspired you to give a TED talk on that subject, and just even your relationship to failure as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of if you look at the top folks who are considered to be, the best in business and in the world and the most successful, they've had many failures, there are countless examples of that. And so I think one of the key things about being an entrepreneur and a leader is you have to get comfortable with failure. Much easier said than done. I don't think. I mean, I'm not comfortable losing a point if I play, tennis. So let alone, failing at business. And so one of the key things I think is being comfortable with that failure. But also the reason I chose that topic for the talk is I think there's a lot of talk about success out there, but there's not as much about failure. And for me, it's not just glorifying failure, right? Saying, hey, failure is okay. I think people should know failure is okay because it happens every day. You're not going to have your best day every day, so that's okay. But I think what's more important is, okay, now that this chapter or this episode is behind me, well, what am I going to do next? And I think that applies to everything from sports, where you look at, focusing on just that point and not the point that just happened or the point that you think you're going to score after, and also to running a company or to being part of a team. Is, hey, listen, I maybe messed up that interview or that meeting, but let me see what I can fix to make it better in the future. And so I think one of the reasons, going back to sort of traits of a leader, that I gave that talk was because I think more people need to be vulnerable and open to discussing failure. And I think if you look at someone's CV, or the best thing is look at their LinkedIn profile, it's a series of achievements, right? It's a series of things that I have done. And nowhere in there for almost everyone on LinkedIn or other platforms does it say, yeah, I massively failed, or I lost investors' money, or I did this. It's almost never mentioned. And usually that's somewhere along the process, right? So I think part of the reason I give the talk was to make sure that people know that it's okay, because if you looked at my LinkedIn, you'll see some good academic institutions, some good corporations on there. But what you don't see is the sort of little sinusoidal waves in the middle of ups and downs in between the different career paths, but also within them.
Take us there then for a second, Aziz. What were some of your top failures, and what did they teach you, and how did they catapult you? Right? Because I believe that the failures are just the feedback, the opportunities for growth. And how did that actually catapult you towards the success that you're experiencing today as an entrepreneur?
Man, I feel like I'm interviewing for a job.
What's your greatest weakness?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say a lot of the failures happened probably in the last few years when I dove into entrepreneurship. So hard to talk about, I think, one specific example, but I would say, I helped co-found a few businesses where I was working very closely with the founders to scale them up. And I think some of the core failures that a lot of founders do, and that I did as well, as in terms of helping those founders, is, allocating your time in the wrong places. And with, let's say, a day-to-day job, that might be not super risky because, you may have a day where you're behind on some work, but you can catch up. But with the startup where, you're constantly looking at the hourglass, just, decreasing of money and time that you have, your time is really, really important. So whether it's, let's say, deciding to strategically pursue something as a project, for the company's going, and that ends up being the wrong choice, and you waste a few months and maybe thousands of dollars on that, or whether it's hiring the wrong person, as we discussed earlier. So I would say for me, a couple of the big ones are maybe spending a lot of money on tech before validating something is a big one that happened to us in one of the ventures, and I think that we could have had a lot more runway had we just focused on validating the concept. And again, that's something that's written about a lot. I read about a lot now, but we sort of learned it the hard way. Another one is just having a business where monetization wasn't the priority in the very beginning. And because of that, I had some good growth. But then when it came to monetization, because it doesn't always obviously work out the first time around, that was an issue. And the business sort of suffered from it. So those are just two examples. That I have endless ones, but those are two sort of major ones. And of course, in both those situations, the companies didn't make it out. But those are the first couple of ventures that we experimented with. I think all the ones since then have are at least treading water or doing well. So again, going back to the the concept of learning, failure is important. It's important to talk about it, but it's more important to say, great, now what?
Mm-hmm. And what can
It's
we do
such
with
a-
this as valuable moving forward, right? Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, it's a like Amy Edmondson just put out a book probably in December, I think it was, about what she calls productive failure, right? And there's kind of two axes as part of that. One is like, is it the right type of failure versus the wrong? Like if it's some catastrophic thing, like, oh no, I spent all the money in my business and I have to shut down, or I made my biggest customer mad and they pulled their contract. Like those are catastrophic things that of course you don't want to fail at. But there's also the other side, right? Is like, as you're growing and developing your people, maybe you're trying a new, like, Susan and I, like we try a bunch of new programs to see what works, what doesn't work. We iterate, we change the modules, we get feedback, we do that kind of stuff. And that's not, I don't even think we don't even consider that failure. It's just like part of what we do.
Feedback.
But it's like, those are things that one is, I mean, I don't even call them failure or consider that failure, but it's like, that is productive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, there's that mantra from Silicon Valley, right? Is like, fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say, I think when they say that, they don't mean fail catastrophically quickly.
Yeah, don't spend the entire
Probably
budget on marketing the first month you get it. But absolutely, I think that's one thing you do learn very quickly is, and I think that's the powerful part about being part of a startup is you learn to iterate super quickly. And I think you mentioned, you don't call them failures. Yeah, I would call them maybe iterations or attempts. And so you learn to be very quick at iterating. And sometimes you'll say, okay, yeah, great, I have this great idea. Let's put it in the backlog. We'll do it, in a few months when we get to it. But then you realize, you know what? Why am I not doing this now? There's not really any reason. It's a small team. We can do it. We have the resources. It'll take 3-4 weeks to map out. Let's go ahead and start. And that's the power of a startup, is you can go from concept to implementation and launch of something very quickly. And then in terms of, if you think about that in terms of money and revenue and cost, that's also much better and more efficient, because whatever, time is money. So if you spend 3 weeks working on something now, now that it's good or bad, rather than, let's say, delaying it 6 months, and at that time you have less money to then work with that as well. So it doesn't work this way with a lot of bigger companies, but with smaller companies, definitely the name of the game and a good trait to have.
I love it. Aziz, if you could give our audience of leaders any piece of advice here in 2024 and beyond, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to actually our discussion on failure. I think the last few years, 2020 onwards, have been especially tough. Pandemic, COVID, even with the markets, if you're involved in that, ups and downs, some goods and some bads. And I think people need to know that every year will have some tough aspect. A lot of people like to start the year by saying, this is going to be my year. I think I don't think that's maybe the healthiest way to think about it, because then if something goes wrong, then your whole concept of the year is gone. I think it's more important to say, hey, here are my goals, and let me work on them. And that's very productive. And then you have something concrete to work on. Let's say you have something in Q1, something in Q2, obviously having it be something you can actually achieve as a goal. But understanding that you will likely have some tough times during this year. And it could be anything, right? It could be something personal, a family member passing away, someone getting sick, you getting injured. There could be something at work where something unpredictable happens on a macro scale that leads to, loss of a job or something like that. So there's a ton that could go wrong. And of course, that's not the mentality you want to go into the year with either. But understanding that there is a sort of an allowance for that, and it's okay that it happens. As we mentioned earlier, usually something happens, it doesn't last for 6 months, it lasts for a day, and the impact is maybe immediate. You try to figure out what you can do to recover from it, and you move on. And so I think if you were trying to succeed, being goal-oriented is important, but also knowing that having some tough days, it's going to happen. There's no one's immune to that. And that's why we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Now, for folks out there, if you want to check out Mojo, you can go to getmojoapp.com. Aziz, tell us a little bit about Mojo and obviously what you're up to, and do you have anything that you want to share with our listeners?
Sure. I think Mojo is a pretty unique concept. The sort of industry is social commerce, so it's bringing in the customer to be part of your marketing engine, but also assuring them that they can actually make money off their opinions. And I think too often we're asked for opinions in everyday purchases, and there's no way to sort of monetize that opinion. You may go to a new city or a new country and call me up and ask me where a good restaurant is, or ask me for a product purchase, my recommendations on something, and I'll say, hey, I think you should go here, and I think you should buy this product. But there's in the end, I'm not gaining anything out of it beyond the satisfaction that you get, hopefully, of making the right decision. I think we want to empower our users here at Mojo and ensure that, first of all, we guide them towards making purchases that are right for them, and doing so by showing them the opinions of folks that look like them, sound like them, where they can feel like there's a relation to the person reviewing the product. So we do that by both video reviews, but also something called the shelf, where you make a list of picks of the products that you love, and then users can check out your shelf. And if they, let's say, think you have good skin, and in the case of Mojo, our industry is skincare, beauty, wellness. And so if they think that you have a great, skincare routine, or if they think that you make good choices in general about products, they can go and check out what you like. And then if you do add something to cart or purchase from someone's shelf or someone's video review, you'll get that person will get a cut of the purchase price. And that's, of course, nicely scalable, because every one of us is sort of an influencer in our own rights within a certain circle of people. For some people, that might be a book club where they pick great books. For some people, it might be, as we mentioned, skincare and otherwise. And so Mojo is sort of a hybrid of e-commerce, but also really bringing in every customer and empowering them to be able to share their opinion, and knowing that their opinion means something and is worth something.
I feel like I want to do a whole separate episode on social commerce, because I have a 12-year-old daughter who is all about the skincare and the TikTok with their friends with the skincare. And it's like, it's driving these 12-year-olds to buy more expensive skincare than I purchase myself.
Yeah, they don't need it. They don't
even need it, Aziz. I'm like, these people are brilliant.
Yeah, there's a lot that shocked me about this industry when I came into it. This wasn't the original idea of the startup, and I didn't think I'd be here, selling beauty products. But I'm learning a lot about the space, and I think what is helpful about it is it gets people talking and conversing with each other more, and trying to seek out others' opinions, who again are, let's say, not necessarily these major influencers or celebrities, but just friends, people that you know. And I think that's more helpful and more healthy than seeking out an artificial look that you see on social media.
I agree.
It's fine. Maybe being obsessed with skincare at 12 isn't the thing that we thought would happen, but at least they're doing it usually among friends, and that's healthy.
Yeah, totally.
And of course, folks out there, you want to follow my skincare routine. So
Robert.
And hair care routine.
That's right. My hair care routine as well.
Oh my gosh, I'm dying. This is good.
Alrighty, folks. Well, we do have to ask Aziz our favorite question here at the Leadership Launchpad. Aziz, what do you want your legacy to be?
Big one. I think I want to make sure that I've done the best job I can inspiring others to not only be leaders, but also just excel at whatever they're doing, and try to, in their own way and in their own right, have as much impact as possible. So I benefited across many years from mentorship, whether that's mentorship in the workplace or mentorship outside the workplace, where you have a mentor that you can go to from time to time and discuss things that are happening in your life, whether personal or professional. And I know that I hope that a few of the folks that I mentor feel the same way about when we have sessions together. And so on a personal level, I'd love for my legacy to be that I impacted as many people as possible in the time that I was given, and I think inspired them to do the same to others. And it's the sort of it goes back to the motto of passing it along. I think karma is a good thing, and so in this case, that would be what I want my legacy to be, is just thinking of myself as someone who's made a lot of impact and inspired others to do the same.
Amazing. And for folks out there, of course, you can connect with Aziz. I've dropped his LinkedIn in the podcast notes, so you can connect with him there. And then check out getmojoapp.com for more there. Of course, for us, for all your executive coaching needs and leadership development, head on over to elitehighperformance.com. Susan, where would you like to leave our listeners with today?
I just love all this conversation about feedback. That's right, feedback, not failure. That's what we say in our dream team locker room, Aziz. It's progression. It's not perfection, especially in business. My goodness, business is like sports. You got to expect you're going to take a hit. And what I love so much, what's buried in this conversation, is that you want to take hits, and you want to take hits fast, because the more you take hits, the more you learn to bounce back. And the more you learn to bounce back, then you start to open up opportunities to bounce up. And that really is the method to the madness in terms of this 2.0 mindset. I can see very clearly based on this interview. How about you, sir? What do you got for our peeps today?
Yeah, for me, this is what we're talking about with trust and giving up the known. And it is that element. It's vulnerable to quote unquote fail. Mm-hmm. It can be hard on our self-concept to fail and our mindset to fail. But if we can develop that trust with ourselves and those parts inside of us, that's when we can get to this mindset, which Aziz has demonstrated is now we're into problem-solving mode. Mm-hmm. And that is the iteration, that's the growth mindset that does lead us to success, right? And the best folks at anything, any skill ever, are folks that learn and grow, because that's the only way you get better. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Aziz, of course, it was a pleasure to have you on. And of course, we love to connect, and I'm looking forward to our next time chatting.
Me as well. Thank you guys so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure, and excited to hear the feedback from the listeners.
And that's right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and feel free to shoot us some feedback our way. You can shoot it to Aziz on LinkedIn, or you can always drop it to us and we'll share it. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.